My life is a story of two halves, cleaved apart by a single, searing night. The first half was painted in the warm, vibrant colors of love and hope. The deep, proud red of a fire engine. The soft, golden glow of a porch light I always left on for him. The rich, bottomless blue of my husband Liam's eyes when he'd smile at me over the rim of his coffee mug, a silent promise that he'd always come home to me. The second half of my life is a study in gray. The cold, gritty gray of cooled ashes. The flat, unfeeling gray of the granite headstone that bears his name. The endless, washed-out gray of the sky on those mornings when the grief feels less like an emotion and more like a physical atmosphere, thick and suffocating. For 5 years, I have learned to breathe in this gray world. I built a life here, a careful, quiet reconstruction. I learned how to get out of bed even when the weight of his absence felt like a lead blanket. I learned how to smile at my students, to celebrate birthdays with my family, to pay the mortgage and unclog the sink, all while carrying this permanent, hollowed-out space inside me where he used to be. I became Sarah McCarthy again, not just Liam's widow. I found a fragile, hard-won peace. And then, on a perfectly ordinary Monday morning, the universe decided to drop a ghost onto my desk. I am a teacher. A high school English teacher, to be precise. My classroom is my sanctuary, a world built of words and stories. It smells of old paper, whiteboard markers, and the faint, waxy scent of the floor polish the custodians use. For 23 years, I have stood in this room, trying to make teenagers care about Shakespeare and semicolons. It's a different kind of bravery than the one Liam knew, a quieter, more patient courage. My desk is an old, scarred oak battleship, a fortress of ungraded essays, lesson plans, and memos from the front office. It is my territory, my command center. I know every coffee stain, every carved initial from a bored student long since graduated. That Monday, I arrived early, wanting to get a head start on a stack of essays about To Kill a Mockingbird. The hallway was silent, the only sound the hum of the fluorescent lights flickering to life. I pushed the door open, the familiar creak a comforting sound. I dumped my heavy bag on the chair, shrugged off my coat, and set my travel mug of coffee down on a clear spot on the blotter. And that's when I saw it. Lying perfectly centered on the green leather of my desk blotter, as if placed there with a ruler's precision, was a firefighter's badge. My breath simply stopped. It wasn't a gasp. It was a full, complete cessation of air. The world narrowed to that one, impossible object. A circle of polished silver, catching the pale morning light from the window. In its center, stamped in bold, uncompromising numbers, 714. Liam's badge. My husband's badge. My mind scrambled, a frantic animal in a trap. This was not possible. It was a trick. A hallucination born of fatigue and leftover grief. I blinked, hard, several times. I looked away at the poster of the periodic table on the wall, then back. It was still there. It gleamed. It was pristine. Untarnished. It looked new. This was wrong. All wrong. The badge I owned, the one kept in a velvet-lined box in my top dresser drawer, the one I sometimes took out on the hardest days, its weight a cold comfort in my palm, that badge was a twisted, blackened thing. Warped by infernal heat, a relic from a funeral pyre. It was a testament to destruction. This object on my desk was a lie. It was perfect. A cold dread, sharp and metallic, flooded my mouth. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. I stumbled back from the desk, my hip connecting painfully with a student's chair, sending it screeching across the linoleum. The sound was violently loud in the silent room. My heart was a frantic, panicked drum against my ribs. This wasn't grief. This was real. This was an intrusion. A violation. I fumbled for my phone in my bag, my fingers numb and clumsy. I scrolled through my contacts, my vision blurry, until I found the number. Captain Ben Miller. Liam's captain. His mentor. The man who had held my arm at the graveside, his face a mask of stoic agony, his uniform cap held over his heart. He answered on the third ring, his voice rough with sleep. Sarah? Everything all right? Ben, I choked out, the word a strangled whisper. The badge. Liam's badge. It's on my desk. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end. I could picture him sitting up in bed, running a hand over his face, trying to process the impossible. Sarah, he said, his voice carefully measured, the voice he used at accident scenes to calm hysterical family members. You're at the school? Maybe you're just tired. It's been a long. I am looking at it, Ben. My voice cracked, rising in pitch, edged with hysteria. I am not dreaming. I am not crazy. It is sitting right in front of me. It's clean. It's not burned. How is it here? How did it get into my locked classroom? Another pause. This one felt different. Heavier. I could hear the faint sound of his breathing, a slow, deliberate rhythm. Don't touch it, he said, his tone shifting, becoming sharp, official. Don't touch anything. I'm on my way. The 10 minutes it took for him to arrive felt like 10 hours. I stood frozen in the middle of the room, my arms wrapped tightly around myself, unable to look away from the badge. It sat there, silent and gleaming, a mute accusation. Questions swarmed in my head, a chaotic, terrifying buzz. Had someone broken into my house? Taken the real badge from its box? But why would they then put it here? And why did it look like this? Was it a replica? A cruel, sick joke? But who would do that? Who would be so monstrous? When Ben finally pushed open the classroom door, he was still in sweatpants and a faded FD t-shirt, his hair disheveled. He didn't say a word to me. His eyes went straight to the desk. He walked over to it, his movements slow, deliberate. His face, usually a roadmap of friendly wrinkles, was a blank slate. He pulled a pair of thin reading glasses from his pocket and leaned in close, studying the badge without touching it. Well, I finally managed, the word tearing from my tight throat. He straightened up slowly, taking off his glasses. He looked from the badge to me, and his eyes were filled with a confusion so profound it mirrored the chaos inside me. It's his, he said, his voice hoarse. It's definitely badge number 714. But Sarah, this can't be. This badge, it was retired after the fire. No one has been issued this number since. It's been out of circulation. But how did it get here? I pressed, desperation making my voice shrill. It was in my house. In the box. The one you gave me. Ben shook his head, his jaw tightening. He looked down, unable to meet my gaze. Sarah, he said, the word heavy with a dread I didn't yet understand. The badge we gave you at the ceremony, the one in your box, it wasn't real. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. The words made no sense. They were just sounds, empty and meaningless. What do you mean, it wasn't real? It was a placeholder, he said, his voice low, confessional. A replica. The heat in that mill, it was catastrophic. The chief, my father, he said the original was unrecoverable. Melted into nothing. So the department had a replica fabricated. For the ceremony. To give you something solid to hold on to. This, he gestured weakly toward my desk. This is the real one. Or one exactly like it. A replica. A fake. The artifact I had cherished, wept over, the last physical piece of him that had endured the fire, was a lie. A prop, handed to me like I was a child needing a comfort object. The anger that rose in me then was so hot, so pure, it burned away the shock for a moment. You lied to me? The whisper was venomous. It was a kindness, Sarah. Ben insisted, his own voice rising in frustration. What good would it have done? To tell you we couldn't even recover his badge? That the fire took everything? It would have only made your pain worse. We were trying to protect you. And now? I demanded, pointing a trembling finger at the gleaming silver circle. Who is protecting me from this? How did it get here? Ben was silent. He looked down at the badge again, a deep, troubled frown etched on his face. He seemed older, suddenly. Weary. I don't know, he admitted, and for the first time, I heard a thread of genuine fear in his voice. But I'm going to find out. He carefully took a clean evidence bag from his pocket, a habit from the job, and used a pen to gently slide the badge into it. He sealed it, the crinkle of the plastic unnaturally loud. He promised to check the school's security footage, to talk to the custodial staff, to ask discreet questions at the station. But as he left, the evidence bag in his hand, I saw the doubt in his eyes. He didn't believe this was a simple burglary or a prank. The locked door, the precise placement, it felt like something else. Something intentional. The days that followed were a special kind of hell. The carefully constructed piece of my last 5 years lay in ruins. The badge had been a key, turning a lock in a door I thought was sealed forever, and behind that door was not peace, but a swirling vortex of doubt and pain. I was a terrible teacher that week. I'd be in the middle of explaining the symbolism of the green light in The Great Gatsby and my mind would snag on that number. 714, I've got him. Liam's last, crackling words over the scanner. I've got him. Who? Who did he have? The official report was clear. Concise. A 3-alarm fire at the abandoned Harrison textile mill. A homeless squatter, one Samuel Riggs, presumed trapped inside. Captain Liam McCarthy, upon hearing this, entered the structure against escalating orders to evacuate. He located Mr. Riggs in the basement. The central staircase, compromised by the fire, collapsed. Both men perished. Their bodies were recovered days later. A tragedy. A hero's death. Case closed. But the badge changed everything. Its impossible appearance was a message. A signal flare from the past. It was Liam, reaching across the years, shaking me by the shoulders. The story you were told is wrong. My investigation began quietly, almost without me realizing it. It started with a restless, late-night Google search. Harrison Mill fire. I read the old news articles, the glowing eulogies for Liam, the brief, almost dismissive mentions of Samuel Riggs, the tragic transient. I went to the public library and scrolled through microfilm of the local paper until my eyes ached, looking for anything, any tiny detail that felt off. A week after the badge appeared, I went to the county clerk's office. The building was cold and official, smelling of dust and bureaucracy. My heart was a frantic bird in my chest as I approached the counter. The woman there had kind eyes behind thick glasses. I'd like to see the full incident report for the Harrison Mill fire, please, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. She gave me a sympathetic smile. Oh, honey. Those investigation files are sealed. You'd need a court order from a judge to access that. A dead end. A door slammed in my face. I felt a surge of hopelessness so strong it nearly buckled my knees. I went to see Ben at the firehouse, hoping for, what? A confession? A clue? The firehouse was a symphony of familiar, comforting sounds, the deep rumble of the idling engine, the static hiss of the radio, the clatter of dishes from the kitchen. It smelled of soap and diesel and coffee. It felt like walking back into a dream. Ben was in his glass-walled office, staring at a computer screen. He looked up as I entered, and his face was guarded. Any news? I asked, not bothering to sit. He sighed, a long, weary sound. Security footage shows nothing, Sarah. The custodians didn't see anyone. No forced entry on your classroom door. It's a mystery. Ben, I need to see the full report. The one they have at the county clerk's. They said it's sealed. His eyes flickered away from mine. He picked up a pen and started tapping it nervously on the desk. Sarah, you have to let this go. It's been 5 years. Dragging all this up, it's not going to bring him back. It's only going to tear open old wounds. For you, for the department. That badge tore them open. I shot back, my voice trembling with frustration. Someone put it there. Why? What aren't you telling me? What is in that report that you don't want me to see? He looked at me then, and for a split second, I saw it, a flicker of pure, unadulterated fear in his eyes. It was gone in an instant, replaced by a stony resolve. The report is the report, he said, his voice flat and final. There's nothing else to tell. Now, I have duties to attend to. It was a dismissal. A lie. I could feel it in my bones. The Firehouse Brotherhood, a family I had once been a part of, was closing ranks. I was on the outside. Driven now by a desperate, burning need for the truth, my search turned inward, toward the shadows of the city. I started visiting the places Samuel Riggs might have known. The homeless shelters, the soup kitchens, the park benches where men with tired eyes huddled under blankets. I showed a grainy photocopy of his picture from an old newspaper article. Most people just shook their heads, their faces blank or wary. But at a small, church-run shelter called The Haven, an old man with a kind, weathered face and eyes that had seen too much winters looked at the picture for a long, silent moment. "Sam," he said finally, his voice a dry rustle like leaves on pavement. Yeah, I knew Sam. He wasn't right. Not after his boy died. But his heart was good. A gentle soul. Always talking about his son, Michael. Said he was a hero, his boy was. A firefighter. My breath hitched. His son was a firefighter? The old man nodded. Died in a training accident, years back. Upstate. After that, Sam, he just came undone. Lost his job, his house. Couldn't stand the sight of a fire truck. Said the sound of the siren was like a nail in his heart. He had a spot he liked, said it was quiet. Under the 4th Street Bridge, by the old train yard. Samuel Riggs, a man terrified of fire, a man who mourned a firefighter's son, was in a burning mill? It made no sense. None of it. I drove to the 4th Street Bridge. The air was cold and damp, smelling of wet concrete and diesel from the nearby freight lines. I found a spot, a recess in the concrete where the bridge met the ground. It was empty, save for a few stained blankets and a crushed, empty can of beans. And there, carved carefully into the concrete support beam, were 2 names, Samuel and Michael. And below them, a date. The date of the mill fire. He was here. He was right here, under this bridge, on the night he supposedly died trapped in a burning mill miles away. A cold certainty settled over me. The official story was a house of cards, and I had just pulled out the foundation. I went back to the county clerk's office, a new, steely determination in my spine. This time, I didn't ask for the sealed fire report. I asked for the property records for the Harrison Mill for the year leading up to the fire. Those were public. The clerk, a different, younger man this time, brought me a heavy, dusty binder. I sat at a table in the records room, the air thick with the smell of old paper. I spent hours sifting through dry, legal documents. Tax assessments, zoning permits, lien notices. My eyes were gritty with fatigue, my back ached. And then, I found it. A transfer of ownership, filed 4 months before the fire. The old Harrison Mill, a condemned historical landmark, had been purchased not by a person, but by a corporate entity, Ethelred Holdings. The name rang a distant, faint bell. I spent the next day in the library again, scouring the business sections of the paper. And I found it. A small article about a proposed Corvin Logistics Park, a new distribution center planned for the west side of town. The developer was a wealthy, prominent local named Robert Corvin. And the holding company he used for his land acquisitions was listed right there in black and white, Ethelred Holdings. Robert Corvin. A man whose face was always in the paper at charity galas. He donated a new computer lab to the elementary school. Why would he buy a worthless, condemned mill? The pieces were there, jagged and sharp, but I couldn't yet see the whole picture. I dug deeper into Robert Corvin. I found older articles, going back 20, 30 years. And in a yellowed, brittle clipping from the town's 30th anniversary edition, I found a photograph that made the blood drain from my face. It showed a young, ambitious-looking Robert Corvin shaking hands with the then-fire chief. The chief was a man with a strong jaw and a head of thick, dark hair, a man I knew from other photographs in Ben's house. His name was Patrick Miller. Ben's father. The Millers and the Corvins. A long-standing alliance. A new logistics park needed land. The mill was in the way, but it was a historical building. Demolition would be a long, expensive, publicly contested process. But a catastrophic, accidental fire, that would solve everything. An insurance payout. A cleared site. No messy preservation fights. But they couldn't just light a match. That was arson. That was prison. They needed it to look like an accident. They needed a scapegoat. A vulnerable, mentally unwell man with a known connection to the fire service, whose presence would add a layer of tragic, confusing coincidence. Samuel Riggs. Did they lure him there? Threaten him? Promise him money for his cooperation in some small, seemingly harmless way? And then the fire, set deliberately, raged out of control. It became the three-alarm inferno that summoned my husband. Liam, who would never ignore a report of a trapped civilian. Liam, who fought his way into the heart of the blaze. Liam, who found Samuel Riggs. And in those final, smoke-choked moments, as the world collapsed around them, what did Samuel tell him? Did he, in a moment of clarity and terror, confess the plot? Did he press something into Liam's hand? A piece of evidence? Something small, something metallic, that Liam, realizing the truth, knowing he might not make it out, instinctively shoved into the most secure place he could think of, the pocket on his chest that held his badge? The badge. It wasn't just a badge. It was a container. It had been on his body, pinned over his heart, when the truth was whispered to him. It was with him when they recovered his body. And someone high up in the chain of command, someone who was part of the conspiracy, had taken it. They'd taken the real badge because whatever was tucked behind it, whatever Samuel Riggs had given Liam, was a death sentence. They replaced it with a replica for the funeral, a hollow, cynical prop. They buried the truth with my husband, and they buried Samuel Riggs under a narrative of tragic mental illness. And 5 years later, a conscience had finally stirred. Someone who knew, who had been living with the rotting secret, had decided to return the evidence. They couldn't go to the police, the corruption was too deep, too close to home. But they could put the badge on the desk of the one person who had the most right to the truth, and the most powerful reason to demand it. It was a desperate, anonymous cry for help. For justice. I drove to the firehouse for the last time. It was late, the bay dark and quiet. I didn't go to the office. I went to the locker room, a place that was strictly off limits to civilians, a sanctum sanctorum. I knew the combination to Liam's old locker, he'd told me years ago, a silly, romantic gesture, our wedding date. October 22nd, 10, the department had retired his locker after his death, leaving it as a quiet memorial. My hands were perfectly steady as I spun the dial. The lock clicked open with a sound that echoed in the silent room. I pulled the metal handle. The locker was empty, save for a single item hanging on the hook inside the door. It was a St. Florian medal, the patron saint of firefighters. It was tarnished, the chain old and delicate. Liam never wore one. He said he didn't believe in luck. This wasn't his. I took it down. The metal was cool in my palm. I turned it over. On the back, etched in tiny, clumsy, hand-scratched letters, was an inscription, for my son, Michael. Keep him safe. Samuel Riggs's son's medal. This was it. This was the truth Samuel had pressed into Liam's hand. This was the evidence that connected it all. And someone, Captain Ben Miller, I was sure of it now, had found it on Liam's body, had understood its devastating significance, and had hidden it here, in this tomb of a locker, too guilty to destroy it, too complicit to reveal it. Until the weight of it became too heavy to bear. I didn't confront Ben. I didn't scream or cry. I felt a cold, clear calm. I went straight home and found the card of a state police detective I had researched, a man in the public corruption unit. I called him the next morning. I walked into his office, placed the St. Florian medal on his desk, and I told him everything. The badge. The lies. The property records. The connection between the Millers and the Corvins. It took months. A quiet, intensive investigation. Subpoenas, wiretaps, a grand jury. Ben Miller was forced to testify. He broke down completely, sobbing on the stand. He confessed that his father, the retired chief, and Robert Corvin had planned the fire. They never meant for anyone to die. They thought the building was empty. They never counted on Samuel Riggs being there. They never, ever counted on Liam McCarthy. Robert Corvin and Patrick Miller were indicted for arson, conspiracy, insurance fraud, and 2 counts of manslaughter. The trial was a media frenzy. I sat in the front row every single day, Liam's wedding ring on a chain around my neck, a tangible piece of the man they had killed. I didn't cry. I just watched. I bore witness. When the foreman read the verdict, guilty, on all counts, I felt no sense of victory. Only a vast, desolate sadness for all the lives shattered by greed and cowardice. The real badge was returned to me, for good this time. I hold it sometimes now. It's no longer a symbol of a lie, or a ghost from the past. It's a symbol of a different kind of courage. Not the loud, flame-defying courage of my husband, but the quiet, dogged, relentless courage of seeking the truth, no matter how painful, no matter how many doors are slammed in your face. It's the courage to believe that the story isn't over, even when everyone tells you it is. My husband died a hero. But his heroism didn't end in that fire. It echoed for 5 years, a silent, persistent knocking, until I was finally brave enough to open the door. He saved Samuel Riggs's story from being buried in a lie. He helped bring down the corruption that killed them both. His legacy is not just that he died trying to save a man, but that he helped save the truth. And my legacy is that I learned to listen. To the silence. To the whispers from the past. To the silent, gleaming plea for justice that appeared one morning, centered perfectly on my desk, waiting for someone to finally ask, why?